So the new Forza Motorsport has been focused since day one really on circuit racing with modern race cars and modern production cars. And we've been focused on delivering clean and competitive racing in both single player and multiplayer. And that focus has really impacted everything in the game. And I mean everything. So we're talking the car list, the track list, the types of fantasy tracks that we've actually built and how we've constructed them, what the layout is thereof, our rendering features, of course, our physics, our AI, and our gameplay features, right? So we've talked a little bit about the car list before. So you've seen some of the cars. I think we've announced over 100 of the different cars that are coming to the game. And one of the important things to note is you've probably seen that we are missing some of the cars that we had in the past, things like the limo or some of what we call oddball cars, the cars that are just not necessarily focused on motorsport. And more importantly, focused on asphalt-based circuit racing. So you'll see that as we release more of the car list, it's really been focused more on that core, that heart of what we are, which is circuit-based racing, asphalt, and modern production cars, modern race cars. And that same thing goes with our track list. You'll see the track list has been much more focused. Some of the lore or fantasy tracks that we had in the past that haven't really, in our opinion, really delivered on that clean, competitive racing experience that we're really looking to deliver in this new Forza Motorsport. We probably aren't seeing them at launch. They may come in afterwards, but when we are launching the game, we really want that to hit that specific focus for our tracks. And we talked a little bit about how that impacted even the layout of, say, something like Maple Valley. The actual circuit itself has not really been changed, but things like where the pit entry is and how the pit lane works there, that all has been changed to really help the clean and competitive racing experience, along with specifically pitting in our multiplayer experience. So we've really rethought about what these tracks mean for us and how we laid them out. Now, that's our cars and our tracks, but it also has affected our focus in terms of other kind of motorsport areas. And so while we have things like drag tires and even drift suspension in the game, one thing to note is because of this focus on our circuit-based racing, the actual modes of drag and drift aren't really supported at launch. So things like the drift HUD with drift scoring or the actual drag mode, they just won't be seen on day one. Of course, we have a long way to go after we get the game out. So there's a lot of stuff that, in terms of features, that we'll be supporting over time. But just so everyone's aware, this is what we've been focused on, that circuit-based racing. Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge difference between what we had in the previous generation and then what is in the new Motorsport. And it really is about two major things. How the AI works in our game really is about two kind of major tech components. The first one is what we call the AI controller. And it basically is how the computer or the game is using the throttle and the brake and the steering inputs to get a car around the track. And then the second big tech piece is the driving line. Well, basically how the AI controller is trying to follow a path, if you will, around the track. So those are the two things, basically a path to follow, which is the driving line, and then the controller, which is how the computer is controlling that car around the path. So both of those things have been completely overhauled. And the focus has really been getting on that clean and competitive racing that we talked about at the top. So two major things here. I'd mentioned in the previous monthly, like, there's no cheats, there's no hacks, there's no rubber banding here. That's all gone, because one of the major things that we found is these things, the cheats, the hacks, the rubber banding, could really cause a lot of racing incidents for players and what I really believe is unrealistic competition, right? So they're pulling you on a straight when they clearly couldn't do that, and they have just extra horsepower or extra grip. And so they're braking differently, they're accelerating differently, and so that creates very different kind of driving behaviors on the track, and it's really unsafe, actually. So we had to create an AI that could be as fast as our fastest human drivers without cheats, hacks, or rubber banding to create this safer, cleaner racing. So that was the biggest first investment and how we focused that on. And the second thing was about overly aggressive driving. We had to really remove a lot of that to allow for this cleaner, more competitive racing. And one of the fallouts of that was we basically looked at how the previous Drivatar system worked, and we ripped that all out. So how the previous Drivatar system worked was that using machine learning, it went out and understood how everyone in the world was driving cars and how they were behaving on track. It would take that knowledge of how players behaved and then put that into your game. So now when I'm racing against Leah or you're racing against me, those behaviors would show up in my game. Oh, that's how Leah drives, or this is how Chris drives. And for a variety of players, right, what that meant is if you're driving like a little hooligan on track, if you're crashing into other cars, you know what, that would come through in the game as well. And all of a sudden you're now really racing with kind of unsafe drivers and that sort of thing. And so it was great for the previous generation. And where we are now, we're just focused on that much more safe, clean, and competitive racing. So that Drivatar system has been removed. So none of those behaviors are actually now coming through in the Drivatar system. And the only things that are coming through with this new Drivatar system is the car liveries, the customizations on the cars, and of course your driver suit customizations and that sort of thing. So those two are the major beats, right? So for the fastest AI possible, we actually used machine learning to create our advanced AI controller. And that's because we have so many different cars, right? We have hundreds and hundreds of cars. We have tons of different tunes for each of those cars. We have tons of upgrades and tunes for each of those cars. And then on top of that, we have tons of track conditions. So what we did was use machine learning to really help us now control that car around the track and really, really get as fast as our fastest drivers. And so we've done that. And I think you'll be about to see that in this video. And then the second thing is how we've created that line, right? So those are the two things, right? The controller and then the line. We used a huge data set to help create our new driving lines. Back in FM7, we had 3 driving lines per track that would cover every car, every tune. And that was all done by hand. We have this fantastic designer named Bonnie who did all of those lines back in the day. And no, she doesn't have to do that anymore, thankfully. And we're having her help us teach the game and our computers to drive these lines and really figure out how to take the slowest car all the way to the fastest car and create all of these different driving lines and all these different conditions. So we've actually now have 19 different lines across all the different tracks versus the 3 that we have in FM7. And they were all created by a computer to be the most optimal line for that type of car in those types of conditions. So you're about to see a comparison video of our FM7 unbeatable AI and comparing it to the fastest AI that we have in the current game. And it's going to be with one of the faster cars in the game, so an LMP type of prototype car on Maple Valley. So a shorter track and a shorter layout. So I think the average lap time is just around 60 seconds or a minute, or maybe a little bit longer. But it gives you an idea of the on a very short track, a minute-ish track with a fast car, just how much of a difference, how much time our new AI system has found just in terms of lap time. So let's check a look at the video. the important part is like this is a legitimate comparison. It's real. This is actually how big of a difference this AI controller and the new AI lines have allowed the cars just to get that much faster. So 13 seconds, right? You can imagine that in FM7 to be quote unquote unbeatable, how much we would have had to artificially either sped up the car or added grip, horsepower, that sort of thing, just to compete with our fastest drivers, right? That's just a lot of hacks, a lot of cheats, a ton of rubber banding. And you can imagine like that's just 13 seconds on a, what was that, a 70-second, 75-second type of lap. That's just a ton of artificial speed, if you will, right? So that's all gone. All of those things are gone in the game because we have this amazing new AI. And so it's just super competitive. And, you know, for our most competitive players, I think they're going to have a real good challenge on their hands. I think it'll be a lot of fun. But also what that means is, you know, we've added a number of new AI difficulties in terms of the scaling. So no matter how fast or skilled you are on track, you can dial that AI into the level of competitiveness that you're looking for. And you'll get the same type of driving. And one of the notes there, I like just watching that because it shows how the AI is using just a lot more of the track, right? It's using curbs. It even stepped off of the curb just a tiny bit at one point, but it's really pushing out to some of those track limits. And it looks more human. It's smoother. It's believable. It's just putting down a really nice, smooth, fast lap. While we're not showing that today, and clearly that wasn't really shown in just the hot lapping, you know, what we're really trying to do is not make these kind of canned, scripted moments in the game where the AI say on every time you drive on this track, on this event, on lap 3, on this turn, the AI is going to spin out in front of you and you'll make the pass and it'll be really exciting like that. There's none of that in this game, right? So what we wanted to make sure is that the AI was controlling the car as best as possible, but that also means that there's limits of its controller ability, right? Its ability to control the car. It will make honest mistakes, and we're not programming those mistakes in the game. We're not saying, hey, look, 25% of the time or 3% of the time, any percentage of the time, we want the AI at this difficulty to brake early or brake late and go wide and go off the track. Like that's not in the game at all. They're making honest mistakes every once in a while. And so a lot of the races, you'll see them, they'll just drive clean. They won't be making many mistakes. And if you're not making many mistakes, you'll be right with them the whole time. But every once in a while, yeah, they'll just make an honest mistake. They'll brake a little bit early, or they'll brake a little bit late, or they'll take a corner just a little bit too wide, and they'll put a tire off, and maybe they lose some time, or maybe they'll go spinning. Those errors are not built into the system as something that we're like, hey, we want this to happen, but it just happens naturally. And what that means is the more and more you drive, the more and more you race, you'll see this happen every once in a while, but it'll be much more natural, and you'll understand, hey, they legitimately made a mistake, and it wasn't something that was planned or programmed or scripted. It's just a lot more fun and authentic feeling that way. Yeah, with all this machine learning, I think people will get the sense that, oh my goodness, it's learning to drive as it's driving, and that's not quite the case. So it's not going to be getting better as it's driving around the track. But of course, this is a game that we'll be updating quite frequently when we get to the game being launched. What that means is we'll be looking at data every day. We'll be seeing how players are reacting to the different AIs in terms of both the difficulty as well as behaviors. And we'll be dialing that in over time, right? So we can make changes on the fly. And if people are wanting certain types of behaviors over others, we can look at that as well. The whole point is that we've built a system that is a lot more flexible than before. And now that we have a clean, a tight, super competitive AI without any of these cheats or hacks, we can actually create some of these cool behaviors, whether it's attacking or defending or taking a line in a certain way. All because like we've built this core AI that's ultra competitive. So yeah, we'll be looking at how to update this over time based off how people are wanting to see this, and looking at how everyone's playing the game over time. This is going to be a little bit interesting. We're going to be showing, you know, one of the big things about Forza has always been about our incredible technical and visual fidelity that we've always brought with every game. And so everything that we've released and everything that we've shown has always been really well polished, and even the tiniest bugs and issues we hem and haw over, and of course the community is like, oh my god, look at it looks so bad because of this and that. This is the first time that we're knowingly going to show something that was never really meant for public consumption. It's really for us to understand, okay, here's how these systems work. But I think it's a really good visual to help everyone understand just the major changes that we've made in the tire model. So to reiterate, we went from a single point of contact to 8 points of contact in the new game. We went from a 60 hertz tire model refresh rate to a 360 hertz refresh rate. So, and like I said, that makes 48 times the fidelity per tire, of which everyone loves to meme. But that's the math, and that's how it works. And everyone's like, that's great, but we need to see more. We need to see how it looks. We need to see how it feels. So, obviously, when you get the game, you'll feel it and you'll understand the differences. But this is, I think, some of the best ways to show it. We're going to show how the single point of contact at 60 hertz used to work. And we'll be looking at a variety of video that kind of shows that. And the tires will be invisible, and you can kind of see the collision for the tires, and then you'll see how it responds to different things like curves and different geometry changes in the track. And then we'll compare that to the new model, and I think you'll see a major difference there. And it'll just kind of give you an idea of the core technology behind it, and just how much that's improved. So yeah, let's take a look at this video, and I'll walk you through some of the finer points. So I think we're starting here with once again our single point of contact at 60 hertz, and you can see that the tire is kind of quickly and not smoothly going over this very smooth curve. It basically is updating really roughly, and it has these kind of spikes and jumps. As you can see that it kind of popped up real quick, popping down as well. So, and this is really low speed, right? This is just a tire at low speed going over a very, very smooth surface. And you can just see just how much it's popping up and down here. So these spikes in the physics from the previous generation, those translated directly to, at speed, really, really extreme suspension changes and changes in car dynamics. So what that means is the faster you're going, the more extreme these spiky reactions are. You can see here, even just these small sawtooth curves causing the tire to really react rapidly and change quickly. And what that just means is in the older system, what you're going to have is a lot more of the suspension reacting violently and causing the car to be really, really upset. And I think some players who are they are able to drive at speed, what would sometimes randomly have the car kind of pop, and sometimes even throw them into the air. Well, guess what? That's a result of this system, right? So you have these extreme forces being propagated through the suspension system because it's just rapidly changing from one moment to the next. It's not smooth, it's spiky. So that's the old system. And I think we have another visualization here as well that shows, yeah, thank you, the Bach mono in FM7, because I'm going to do a direct comparison between the Bach mono on Laguna Seca on this turn. And you can see how, yeah, right there, you get these real spikes and how the tire is moving up and down. It's really just not smooth. It's not recognizing some of these smaller collision changes over the curb. It's very, very spiky and violent. And this is slowed down dramatically from the actual speed. This is our physics designer actually driving at speed, and then we just slow the footage down to kind of give you this idea of just how violent and snappy kind of the suspension is reacting based off of the single point of contact and at 60 hertz. So that's the older model. And one of the important points here is you'll actually see how the tires aren't even reacting to some of these curbs right now, right there. It's because a little secret with how FM7 curbs work, there's none of the actual collision geometry being recognized in the game. So the different sawtooth curbs, they're all flat, like in terms of collision in FM7. What we did was we added this kind of what we call the noise texture, if you will, within the physics system that would put undulations into the suspension. And it was all done because if we actually modeled the curbs, the car would just be completely upset every curve, right? So we knew this, and this is just how the state of our physics system and our tire model and, of course, our curves worked in FM7, right? So let's take a look at the new tire model. I think we have footage from that. So this is the same car, the Bach Mono, same corner on Laguna Seca, but it's got the new tire model. It's got the 8 points of contact. It's also got the 360 hertz refresh rate. And generally speaking here, you can see all of the different details, all of these different points seeking out the different collision changes, the changes in all the geometry here, how the tires are going over the sawtooth curbs here much more smoothly, right? They're finding all the grip. They're deforming as they're going over all the different surfaces. That's what you get with this new tire model. And as I just mentioned with FM7, none of those curves were actually collision-based modeled, right? They were all just flat. In the new game, all of the curves are actually scanned. They're actually modeled off of real life. The collision is actually the real, just as real as real life. So what you're getting is the honest collision geometry here, the honest physics. But you can also see just how much more grip and how much more smooth this new tire model handles this crazy uneven surface at speed. Once again, this is at speed, just really slowed down. So it's really difficult to get across just how massive a change it is going from the single point of contact at 60 hertz from FM7 to this model with the 8 points of contact at 360. You're seeing a little bit of it here. It's just much more smooth. It's tons more grip. And you know, when you actually get to play the game, you'll feel the change immediately. So yeah, it's a huge leap forward, and the game just feels great. And I can't wait for you all to feel it. You know, we've talked already about how we've added new compounds in terms of the race tire into the game. We have the soft compounds, the medium compounds, the hard compounds. And we'll be looking at a little bit of that today when we actually get on the wheel. But, you know, the soft tires, they're more like a qualifying tire. They wear really quickly, but they also have incredible amounts of grip. The medium tires take a little bit longer to wear. And of course, the hard tires can last a lot longer. And the way we've tuned these different compounds is that I think that the softer compound usually lasts about 3 to 4 laps, depending on the track. And the mediums kind of in the 7 to 8 lap range. And then, of course, the hards are a lot longer. So that's just generally how those tires and the tire wear plays out for the race compounds. Now, we also have I mentioned at the top of this, we have the drag tire compound as well. And of course, the street and sport compounds come back as well into this game. And of course, one of the other things is we have vintage tires and wet tires. So our vintage tires are for cars that are fairly old. Kind of imagine the Grand Prix Legend type of cigar cars with those bicycle tires. That's a specific type of tire that's still in the game. But also, yeah, you mentioned wet tires. Wet tires in the game as well. It's much more of a thing in terms of swapping tires out in our multiplayer experience because, you know, obviously pitting. In our campaign mode, it's a little less about pitting, but you will be using wet tires in the campaign mode. So yeah, once again, so we have street, sport, race tires with the 3 different compounds. We have vintage tires, we have drag tires, we have the wet tires. And that just covers all the different tire compounds we have in the game. The other thing to talk about is we've completely redone how the heat works on all the tires. And that's really about just smoothing this curve in terms of post grip. Like once you get to maximum grip and how it decays over once you're past that grip limit, there's a lot of things that affect that. And heat is a big proponent of this. So the grip fall off at extreme temperatures has, like, the entire heat curve has been changed for us for all of these different compounds. The most important thing is the fall off at extreme temperatures is much smoother. So I think in the previous tire model FM7, we would have kind of, you'd hit extreme heat and then you'd hit this real kind of cliff in terms of grip. And once again, it's just super spiky behavior, right? You've got grip, and then it's just gone. And now we have much more kind of smooth decay of grip over time. It's much more realistic. And it actually makes, if you've overdriven the car, it makes catching the car a lot more easy. And of course, that means a lot more grip and a lot more drivability overall. But this also has implications for like our drifters in the community. You're no longer going to have, you get the extreme heat tires and it would fall off immediately, and you're kind of dealing with that spike in grip. It's much more catchable. It's much more understandable. It's smoother. I think you'll have a lot more joy in terms of finding where you are on the grip at extreme temperatures and be able to control the car there. So it's, I think we've made a lot of improvements there for everyone, in fact. And then, of course, there's all sorts of things that are affecting tire wear. One of the biggest things that we had just made a change with in the last couple months is just basically how much tire wear is being affected by heat. Obviously it's all authentically modeled. And we've backed that off just a little bit to make sure that at extreme cases when you're really overdriving the car, and really put the car in a bad place, that there's still additional grip there and not overly super causing the tires to degrade over time really quickly. And that's all, we're still tuning that, but it all feels really, really good right now. So let's see, what other things can I mention around tires? I think that's the biggest things here. I think, just as another note in terms of catchability, drivability, since this isn't really a tire thing so much, but I do want to talk about throttle lift oversteer. Is one of my bugaboos. It's one of the things that I really wanted to make sure we got better, or quote unquote right, this time around. I was always unhappy with certain behaviors in FM7. This was one of them, and lifting even the slightest mid corner in FM7 would often cause just an incredible amount of throttle lift oversteer, and I thought it was just excessive. So we looked at that, and as a note, we've completely changed about how much torque is being applied as you're kind of lifting off the throttle. It's much more realistic, and wow, it's much more catchable. It's understandable. It's much more authentic. Anyway, sorry, just a little note. It wasn't really tires, but I figured since we were on the subject of drivability in tires and what that all means, I thought I'd throw that in there too. So I'm going to be jumping on to the Logitech G920, and it's the wheel I mostly use at work, just because we do know that this specific wheel, the G920, is the most used wheel for the Forza player base. So the majority of our players that are using wheels, or most of our players that have a wheel, are actually using this wheel. We've tuned this wheel a lot. It feels great. And of course, I play on all of the different sim rigs as well. I have a Fanatec set up at home. It plays great on that. We'll go into wheel support and all the wheel features, as well as just what we're doing on force feedback and that sort of thing in a later Forza Monthly. What I wanted to do today was just jump on this wheel and drive around Kailami in a GT car, and just kind of show you what it kind of looks like. Now, I want to hedge my driving because it's not very good. I think this is going to be potentially memed, or no, it will definitely be memed. But more importantly, I think I'm opening myself to a lot of criticism. I'm not a good driver. But we'll struggle through this, and we'll kind of see what a novice on a wheel kind of looks like driving a GT around Kailami. So yeah, just a quick note here, what we're looking at and what we're about to see. So this is the Porsche 991 RSR from, I think, 2015. This won the FIAWC GT championship back then. We're going to be taking a couple hot laps around Kailami. In terms of assist, I think I have the braking line on, so that's going to be there. I don't have any other assist outside of ABS. So ABS is on, no traction control, no other types of assist there. It is manual, but not with clutch. Once again, GT car, around Kalami, we do some hot lapping. Oh yeah, this is on a Series X. So that's what we're going to be doing today. This would be known as a safety lap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just one clean one, not
one
necessarily driven in anger, but get one good quality time in. Okay, that was a lot better. A little squirrely there. Cool. There we go.
Hey.
We have a lot to talk about still, right? We have our feature multiplayer to get into, and we have all these other modes that we're going to be bringing back, as well as some of the other deeper systems that are going to be driving multiplayer. So there's a lot to dive into. I hope you enjoyed the AI and tire deep dive today, as well as a little bit of the wheel. We will, like I said, we were going to dive more deeply into the wheel support going forward. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's show.